Welcome everyone to our What's New in Creo 11 webinar. My name is Ine Verhaeren, and together with my technical colleague Stefan Vlaming, we will host this webinar about the newest Creo version. Before we dive in, I will explain you a little bit about the GoToWebinar environment. You can minimize this menu when it's in the way. You can also put it on full screen. And there's also a question bar that you can use to ask questions during the webinar. At the end of the webinar, we will see how much time we have left and probably answer some of the questions. If your question was not answered during the webinar, we will come back to you afterwards. So now we go to the agenda of today. The first part is about productivity and usability. That's always the first part of the newest Creo version. And then we go to design for electrification, also for composites. And then we explain a little bit about model-based definition. We then go to the simulation-driven design and end up with design for manufacturing. Stefan, go ahead.
Thank you, Ina, for the introduction. Small thing we also want to start with is the reasons why you should upgrade. So increased productivity and efficiency, and there's some new features, of course, new capabilities as well, which for some clients can give you increased value. Compatibility and to stay in sync with what Windchill does, or if you stand alone with other systems that you work together. And of course, prevent that your Creo version is out of support and is vulnerable for internet hacking and what have you. So these are the reasons why you should. We also typically follow the PTC schedule. Roughly around April, PTC releases a new version. We then in an Optis start testing that and validating that to version, in this case, Creo 11.0.2. This is area September. This year there were, PTC was a little bit late with that second version. And then we can start to implement for customers who do not have Windchill. And then the third version, where there's some less and less bugs in it, less and less issues that are still acting up, we can move to PLM customers as well. And typically, the support end date is 4 years after first release. So you have an idea like Creo 7 is now running out of support. Like Ina said, the agenda, let's have a look at the productivity and usability, what we have new in there as well. First of all, the drag handles are a little bit changed. You'll see the yellow icons, which also gives you a direction, and they are also orientated in the direction where you can move. So it gives you an indication. It's not only flat to screen like in the past, it gives you also an indication. And if you're looking normal to that icon where you cannot drag in that direction, you'll see a yellow line. So you have an indication, there is a drag handle, but I cannot move it or change it from this orientation that I'm looking to my part. Well, that's the first one. Second one, there's now also in the options dialog a possibility to search different settings, and it's kind of working like we have in the Creo main interface, where you can look for commands or features that it highlights what you just selected when you hover over it. Right? So a good indication where you can go faster to the correct feature that you want to change or setting that you want to change. There's some improvement in the model tree as well. A little bit less used because in the past, because I think it was not working always correct. We have now an expand by level option. In the past we had an expand, but he expanded always all features, or well, if you have an assembly structure, it's expanded all or nothing, which was annoying. Now it's expand by level. So if you select nothing, you expand the full model tree, one step. If you click multiple times, it expands more. And if you select an assembly, for instance, or sub-assembly, he expands only that assembly. So very cool as well to handle. I will show some things in a minute, like that settings search. I will have a look into that as well. Now a new item in the selection, box and lasso and trace is added to it. A box was already there, but they added some cool function that he only selects what is visible at that moment and not something in the back. There's also change in the selection priority for people that working a lot with kills. This is very time saving. In the past it was annoying, but I'll show that in a moment in the demo itself. And this is also something that we had a lot of questions about the last years. Finally added is scaling for pallet shapes. So any import geometry that you do, you can now with this setting direct it that it always jumps to 1, scale 1, so that but you can always change it afterwards as well. Let's have a look into Creo itself, how these things work. I have here a little part open. It's like a rotational knob that you want to use for something. You see here on the bottom, there's a button extra to it that's visible or not visible. So what happens this is the past behavior, but it's still a possibility. So if I'm selecting something, you'll see that I'll also selecting the geometry on the back, which is sometimes unwanted. So what we can do now is with that only visible, you can select the same things, but you'll see that he only selects the front and not the back, which makes sense. Under my box selection, next to my box selection, I have also a lasso function where I can, instead of selecting a box, I can draw a lasso around the parts roughly, and then I have only those parts selected. Also very fast in some cases. And the trace is kind of working the same. It's just you drag a line and he selects what you drag to. And all those surfaces, it can be in surfacing. Now this is on a solid, works the same on surface. So, and if you press Control, you add things to it. And if you press Control and you deselect one, it's also a possibility. So it's the mix of both. It's not like intense selection that you have like 4 edges and you cannot select one deselect one of it. This is way cooler. You can add it, you can remove it, what you want. Note, and the trace is only working on things that are visible. So yes, I can select this as well because it was not visible from that orientation. It's not selected. Yeah, so a cool one as well. Now let's have a quick look what is changed in that surfacing. It's a very detailed. If you don't work with surfacing, you will never need that. But anyhow, so the highlight is always a surface. If I now right-click on top of that, you'll see that he automatically picks the kilt. In the past, we had to multiple right-clicks every surface individual, and then on the entire kilt, now it's inverted, and now he goes to every surface after the selection. So first the kilt, and then the individual surface. It saves me a lot of time as well. Let's, for that scale function, What was the behavior, of what is the behavior still is depending on what I want to do. I will add that arrow again. Maybe I want that on the other side. You'll see that he automatically picks a size, a scale based on the size of my part and based on the size of the item that I'm using here. And this is not always wanted because you often have a very strange scale. So I'm just going to cancel that. If now I'm going into options, you'll see that I can quickly here search for my menu. So scale imported, you see that also highlighting. And if I now, sorry, hover over it, it jumps automatically to that, and I can deselect. So now this is auto scale. So he changes that scale. If I deselect it, he will not scale again, and he will always use the default value of 1, of course. And so if I do the same, my import, pick it somewhere, you see automatically pick scale 1, which I then, of course, like you know, can orientate and use and place like this, which makes it very quick to have another sketch in there. So very cool, very fast to adapt those things to it. Let's have a look back to our presentation. The next item is a big one. They added multi-bodies for sheet metal as well, which, so in the first step, it's when you make a single sheet metal part, you can use multi-body functionality in there as well, like cut or mirror or split parts, so all the functionality and multi-bodies you have in there as well. And that's one step, but you can also use one part, or you start with a part and you split that later on into multiple sheet metal parts. Often you have a rough shape that you have an idea with, and later on you want to work that out. So this is a very cool way to do so. In the past it was possible, but you needed advanced assembly for that. So now this is in the basic license incorporated. Therefore, they added a sheet metal preference menu where different bodies can have different settings, can have different thicknesses or design rules or bend allowances, things like that. Again, let's have a quick look. Let's go into Creo. I will just create a standard part, a solid part, because I want to start with a simple block, which I will convert to sheet metal. So let's start with a simple extrude. Center rectangle to make it symmetrical. And then height, I will not care about values. I will just make a rough block like this. And this will, like we do in previous versions, we can convert this to sheet metal. So I press sheet metal. I tell the system I want it as a shell. It has to be a wall thickness of 3 millimeters. I will move the bottom from it and now have one part. It's not yet sheet metal, there's no bends in it, it's not split or anything. So with conversion, we can split our part. I will just select all edges, and with my split function or with my rip function, I will split my part in two. So in the end, you'll see I have a volume on the outside and a volume on the inside, which gives me an error as well, because now you could have that in the old versions as well. I have two volumes, but they're still both in one body, which is not wanted. And we can solve that with of split trim body. We can split it by volume. It's like you should create it different not attached volumes and then split it afterwards. That's the same functionality that we're using here. And what we see as a result is that we have two bodies, and we have one body on the outside and we have one body on the top surface and that side. To make it a little bit more clear, let's give those bodies a different color. I'm just picking color to have a good view how it works. Two bodies which I can individually preview or unfold. Now I'm seeing one part. If I, of course, make the other one active, that's the active button for bodies, I can see the other one, the unfold, the flat pattern as well. This is one way of starting. So I started from a block which converted, and of course it goes without saying, if I'm changing my basic block, everything is linked on it and it will change accordingly. What is a second possibility as well? If I'm going in sheet metal, I can choose the function new body. I'll just start a new one. I can give that bodies, of course, a different name like I want. And this one is an important one as well. If I keep that link active, it will pick the same thickness, the same bend radiuses and what have you not. So I don't want that. I will deselect that link to part. And in this case, I can create a new part or new body, and not a part, but a new body based on with other thicknesses and other values. Looking where that equal is. So I'm making kind of a U shape at the bottom, which gives me, of course, automatically a bend because I'm using extrude. I'm snapping this to the end with shift, and I will set here that my thickness will be not 3 millimeters, but 1 millimeter. And I want that a thin plate to be. So 3 bodies, different methods created. Let's change the color as well quickly so that we have a good idea of the different bodies. What is added as well, what is also new functionality is of course our flat pattern. Now we have a flat pattern manager where he creates that in one function, the different flat states. So he can make that unfold, and that's one thing. And of course, we also have a functionality to create an instance or create representation, and like we had on a single part individually. And I can make them both, and because it's a representation, maybe I want the initial and the bent version as well, the flat version and the initial version also. Let's do that quickly on all 3 bodies. Initial, and if we now go back, you see in our simplified rep, I can have my first body like this, my flat state from the same part, my second body and the flat state, and of course my third body and the flat state, which I can use on a drawing if I want to, which I can use whenever I want to build that up, still based all in one part. Forgot to go to master. What is also a possibility, of course, is that anybody that we have here, that we create a separate part from it, and that's mostly our final goal, where we create a part from a body and then create that assembly manually, because they're all based on the same coordinate system. You can all assemble default, which makes it easy as well. So create part from body. If I do that, I have 2 options. I can use that via an inheritance or via a copy geometry. One important thing, you don't need an advanced assembly license. Copy geometry is otherwise not possible, but for that body functionality, it's included in the default of the standard Creo version. What's the difference between an inheritance and a copy geometry? With inheritance, I make a link between those 2 parts and I see the real value, and I can add push dimensions with it as well. With a copy geometry, I can in the future break that link if I want to. I find this one the most interesting one. So if I'm using a copy geometry, you see an external copy geometry, but you can change that update control where you can tell the system, don't watch to that that start part and that dummy part anymore, but keep this alone, or use no dependency, depending on how you want to do that. Yeah. So a quick way of creating sheet metal parts, and often it's interesting to build that up. I can use any feature on any body. That's the same. It's just a quick introduction on what we can do in here. Hope you guys find that interesting. Please do let us know. The next item in the productivity and usability is enhanced enclosure volume feature. In previous Creo 11, it was added in Creo 10, but it was still under a separate license. Now they added it in the standard as well. So an interesting development. And what they added as well, I will just play, because sometimes it's a little bit too long quicks and I can speed things up here. What is also a possibility that you have an aligned and an optimized function, so that he aligns to a certain coordinate system that you can select, or with optimized, making the closest and the smallest as possible to around my part. They added also functionality to push the parameters, the values, which you can, of course, maybe via Windchill, push down to ERP to have a calculation of price estimation based on that. So this is something that they added as well. The box is also possible to add kills or surfaces or individual surfaces, like you see, selecting more and more adds more and more to the box or changes the box or the size. There's also a functionality where you can work with. Yeah. Or keep the part and exclude the volume and the body. And that's in this case also a functionality to have all surface and that you don't have to select them. There's a new from pattern option in a point pattern, a little bit maybe strange on how it works. I'll show that in a moment. And also a faster pattern regeneration for that identical option. And they're still working hard to speed up those patterns. It's getting faster and faster, and they keep on working with that. Let's have a look. So we'll just open that part and the same part we've seen here. What I've built up here, just a little bit of a back history. What I did, I created a sketch first, one line with an offset from my outer shape. And on that line, I did a pattern. I put a point and a pattern on that point with a certain distance. From that group, the sketch and the pattern, I made a second pattern which offsets the sketch inwards and changes a little bit the distances between the points to make it nicer. So what we can do now, if I create a hole, I will create a hole on a point with a surface selected. Let's pick diameter 8, for instance, and through all. Yeah. So this is one hole. In the past, it was a little bit hard to select that because he only sees the reference feature of the first one. What we can do now, we can just go into point and select, you don't have to look into that sketch or the feature that I made, but you can look also in this pattern and all the points that are in that pattern, which makes it faster and interesting as well. You see also the regeneration time. It's pretty fast because they're all identical, but of course it's way more favorable to tell the system they're all identical because they have not a half cut or going outside of my part, which speed up the calculation significantly. We don't test this, it's somewhere between 20-30 times faster than a standard pattern. So please use that if they are all the same. Yeah. A short change, but interesting enough to show. Shrink wrap. There's now also that bodies they added in shrink wrap, and it gives you the functionality. So when you create your shrink wrap, that you have the option to all parts that were in your original part assembly to convert every part into a body, or like we see on the second node, merge those bodies into one. Again, let's have a quick look. I will create a new part where I want that shrink wrap to be created in. And I'll create the shrink wrap in here, and I'm just selecting an assembly. Shrink wrap, I have an assembly ready, which I'm gonna use. The placement can be default, or with the coordinate system, you can place it on another location. We'll use default here. And of course, I want all solid geometry. Do I want to exclude internal components? No, I want to see them all because that's interesting if I'm making a section as well. That's an option that you want to choose. Now I have the option quilts and bodies. Let's go for that option bodies and see what the effect is, because he will keep now all as separate objects. Okay, let's import that geometry. And if we have a look here at the bodies, you'll see that he creates a body for each part that I'm using into my assembly. So even in this case here, I have a bearing somewhere. All those dots are in there as well. If I don't want that, I could change that in my main assembly first before I'm doing this. I can also change my shrink wrap. So let's have a look at the other options that we have here. We also have a functionality merge, merge all in parts. This is only merging different parts that already have bodies in it. So maybe you have one part with multiple bodies. So he will merge that as a part. No, in this case, I want to merge all parts in one. And maybe some parts are not possible to merge because they do not attach, they do not interact. So leave as a separate object if that operation doesn't work. Okay, let's try this and let's have a look. And you'll see that he will only make 4 bodies now. So a combination of different parts which are linked or not linked together. So very easy as well. What is the main advantage, I think, here is if we make, for instance, a section and I want to make a drawing still from that I'll see all the individual parts. I can have a view on interferences and things like that. Although it's built in one part, it's one part that is used in my assembly, thus way lighter. But sometimes you want to have the mix of one part and seeing all details inside as well. Going back to our presentation, welding also about some new functionalities. The spot welding is also now in the new menu style with added functionality, of course. We can also put welding on edges and chains or something like that. And there's also a new project sketch points functionality that's added to it. So instead of adding sketching geometry and projecting this, sketches or something or lines, we can do that on points as well. Let's have a quick look. You'll see that we'll linking that members. I will guide a little bit the speed. What they want to do is create a datum plane with an offset, and on that datum plane make a sketch. So they add a few points here on that datum plane with an offset, and you'll see that it's now with that new function you can just, oh, sorry, one too quick. you can project them into your part. And as a second step, you can use this to put your spot welds on top of it, which makes it very easy and fast for adding that multiple points on multiple levels and multiple height in this case. Here we're doing kind of the same on an offset line, where again I want to have multiple spot welds divided over that distance. Again, it's important to have that information, and now it's also possible to export this into an XML so that a machine can pick that positions up and get that welding automated. So some freestyles, a little bit into surfacing new functionality. The rotational pattern was already possible. What they added now is if I use that geometry to create additional features to it, that I can also use that as a reference pattern. So he looks into the freestyle pattern to use a reference pattern into, in this case, that round feature on the end. There's also a new bevel operation where you can just split a line. It's like adding a chamfer round to it, depending on the edge sharpness settings. You can make it a chamfer or make it a round, which is also very interesting. And as last, we have also an easier control of that multi-level. In the past, you just had to select it and then go back and hope you had the correct one. And now if you choose level 1 or level 3, depending on what you want to use, it's saved in the model tree, and you can always jump back to that. So you know that you made some changes in level 3 while working maybe in level 1. In style, there are also some changes, and I found this personally a good one. There's now also a constraint window, like we had a long time in a boundary blend feature. In style, it was always looking at the lines and what constraint it was. So a single line was tangent, double line was then curvature, of 4 lines were curvature. It's depending on what you see. Yeah? And now you see it in the menu, which explains it and makes it way more clear. And also you have direction view on which surface it's putting the reference on. There's also added the possibility to create curves below 3 degrees. Of course, 1 degree, as you all know, is a straight line. I don't think we're going to use that a lot, but a 2-degree point can be interesting because you only have the line and the angles, the starting angles, and no points in between, which makes it, again, less points, more smooth, and a nicer surface. And this is also a good one. In the past, you had sometimes an issue that you start dragging on a curve and you think I'm moving it to the left, but in reality, it is moving in depth as well in the direction that I don't want, which is sometimes annoying. So what they add now is when you drag it into your view direction, so flat to your screen, which is way more intuitive and easier to work with. People that work in style will know what I'm talking about. So this was the first part, production and usability. Some cool new stuff in there as well. Let's have a look at the second part, design for electrification. There's some new functionality in there as well. First of all, some menus that are also overhauled to the new style. The cable tree is also, like you see here on the image, it's also completely overhauled, again in a new style, which makes it way more easier to see. where you can also interact in that tree where you want to. You have also some filters added. Maybe you don't want to see certain things or locations or things like that. You can filter on as well. So made it a lot easier to work with. There are also some productivity, and when you're working in your assembly structure, it's not, you can now put that anywhere you want to, and a lot of settings that are saved in the model. And depending on, in the past, it was when you save it, some settings were gone. Now this is also solved. And the selection and highlighting of cables is now also active. Let's have a look for design for composites, a new module that we have a few versions now, and we have a lot of interest in that as well. So transitions and laminate sections. Transition, what are transitions? You'll see here transition on the end, and that's making not only going from abrupt stop on different plies in one go, no, moving those transitions over into different steps to have a better adhesion to a part or to an existing part or to something else, or to matching two different plies together. And that's one thing. Also, the laminate section, so the part geometry is not there, but if I make a section through it, he will show me that laminate section with the equal model and built up, and how my different plies, how it's built up in here. And there's now also a reference, cross-reference selection. So if I'm select something in my section, I will see it in my model, in my tree as well. Draping simulation is also improved. Not only the calculation of that, yeah, it's kind of an unfold of a complex shape is changed, but also the preview that you have, it now handles a little bit like a sheet metal item into your view. And of course, you can also see the results. This is an indication if it's possible to put that surface with that curvature, with that in that mold, so you have an idea if it's possible to put that surface, that spline down in that area. They added also a cool functionality that you can export every ply, right? Because that's a layup of different plies, every ply into a file, which can be imported into a laser projection machine, which gives you the placement of the next level. You see here, I want to add a new ply to it, and with laser, he will give you an indication of, give you the position projected on top of your mold where you want to place that. In the past, so we're working also together, as you know, with we're the main sponsor of the solar team, where you see a picture here of the top shelf of their car. In the past, they also always have to measure that exactly, so measure every ply individually. We hope this year that we gain a lot of time by doing that via that laser projection. Next item, model-based definition. Used more and more. We get a lot of questions of different customers about this functionality and how we can, in essence, stop making our 2Ds. Now they added some cool functionality in there as well. So they added table functionality, where you can orient it like you want, flat to screen or on a different orientation as you want. There's also support, of course, for Creo parameters and what you can use in there, and a cool, I find it very cool functionality with semantic references where you can link. Let's have a look at the video. So it builds up. I can make a table. this is oriented to my screen. I can put it on an angle or a datum plane, an existing datum plane if I want to. Of course, I can make my own orientations in there as well. There's also predefined or your own tables that you can reuse, even from modeling. From your drawing, you can reuse them and use them in here. Of course, you can scale, you can enter values. That's the easy part. But the associated objects, this I find very cool. So he just clicked on the arrows and he jumps to a certain orientation, a certain state that we've built in there as well. So you have a direct indication of it's these bolts, M6 by 30, it's these bolts, in this case it's highlighting, that we are talking about. So because it's a complex assembly, you don't know which bolts are which, or you have to see which length there is. In this case, you can just highlight them very quickly. Yeah. Filling a table, that's nothing that's special, but you can use tab to jump to the next item and or copy paste items in there as well, or use text editor. Different nodes, but of course, like you see, and with the and symbol referenced to the parameters of my part, changing line thicknesses and styles. And this is, I think this is going to be a little bit less used, but it's interesting to you to know. This is also an interesting use case. What they do here is quickly link a certain dimension to, in this case, a roughness, because sometimes it's very hard to indicate this roughness needs to be on that surface and this surface. With this method, it's very viewable. Note that this also is visible into your Creo view or a step file that you export. That's referencing, that semantic linking between a dimension and a surface that the surface is highlighting should be supported in other software, CAD software packages as well, so that you can see the effects over there. Oh, that's also cool. GD&T Advisor, some a little bit smaller things, enriched support for slab and slots. So one surface that is split by other ones is sometimes hard to define that it goes over that four surfaces and not one only. So this is changed as well. And whole callouts are changed also a little bit. And now you'll see that they added a new symbol, like for the counter bore or countersink. They added a new symbol so that you have that note in one go, which defines the whole function. Simulation driven, Creo Simulate Live also changed. There's now functionality added to calculate your heat transfer. Heat transfer between solids and fluids. Fluids, of course, can be air as well, for instance. So the heat loss can be calculated in there as well. Of course, some analysis measurements are added as well, because you want more information about the flow or heat, or maybe the mass flow that you have in there. And of course, the updated, that's on general simulation live is using Creo ANSYS simulation, and both are updated to the latest ANSYS 23R2 solver. So they have the new functionality in there as well. Here you see a good example with the section of the cooling of those parts and how it works and what the effect is. So again, Simulation Live gives you a very quick, direct indication of what you are calculating. There are some better, more detailed ideas, but if you have a lot of iterations, a lot of changes on your part, a lot of things you want to still test, is Creo Simulate Live very interesting too for that. Creo ANSYS simulation. A transient structure is also added to it with different different setup options that you can use. And you can also define constraints as functions of time or in time, and depending on how you want to do that. A good example of, sorry, I want to click that as well. A good example of an transient mode that you have is, for instance, a truck that's driving over a bridge. And then you have an idea. So the load changes over time over the position on the bridge. And now we can calculate this as well in a certain area, so that you see the placement of the stress are changing over time depending on what I want to do. I'll skip this one a little bit forward. And as last item in the simulation area, we have, of course, generative design. Now there's a control of the minimum thickness. In the past, that was sometimes going very thin, and you don't, if you want to print that part, you have also thin limitations. There's now also a support for bearings that you want to add in there, and a symmetry constraint where you want to use. So the idea is here with generative design that we let the system define the ideal shape and to comply with the strength that we have. The blue parts need to be incorporated in there. He cannot touch the red parts because that's kind of like a no-go zone because I already have other geometry in there. And the gray zone is the area where he can make that shape in, where he can define his best shape. Now we are adding a cylindrical load, like this is a bearing, that blue top part is a bearing. So we're adding that cylindrical force in there as well. Some constraints where the other loads are or the position is, and depending on that, we add some design criteria. Of course, some limitations, but also symmetry. So the part must be symmetrical over a datum plane, and that's what he has to solve and try to optimize. So he creates a shape. This is now still created as a tessellated part. Typically, tessellated parts are very hard to change, but in Creo we have the functionality to create this, to change that part to a freestyle model as close as possible, which he also pushes the symmetry functionality in, and on the freestyle model I can still change my part or remove things or change on the geometry if I want. So our last item for today is designed for manufacturing. A new functionality, new feature that is added, Lattice Connect, where you can connect two or more already created lattice structures. Again, the functionality in Creo will mainly be used for metal printing, for complex printing where it can be done in plastics as well. There's no limitation, but where you want to analyze this up front before you print. In plastic, it's easy. You just make a print, you test it if it's strong enough. The cost is not that high. But if you do that in metal, you want to be sure that everything is calculated correctly, and you can use these geometry as in a simulation as well. So also interesting if you need that. High-speed milling. There's now a new function. I will just already start the animation or the video. There's now a new toolpad added where you just can define a volume which is specially made for the shape that you see here, because he wants to go around 360 degrees, and that was in the past an issue. They're speeding things up a little bit. And you'll see that that part is creating my volume piece by piece. So the functionality that you see now is removing the material live is something that is added in Creo 10 already. But it was not possible for this kind of shape. You had to do that in separate parts by yourself. You had a little bit more work on that, and with that new parts, it makes it easier. There are also support for different mills, L mill, ball mill, and bull nose mill in there as well. I'm just gonna speed up it a little bit. You'll see the quickness. I'm just defining that the width of what he may mill must be a little bit smaller. And if I just press update, you'll see that my trajectory, what my mill has to do adapts automatically. So very quickly, I can change my machining, and maybe I want to machine this part first and then a second step, which makes it easier. In the past, we had to make surfaces individually to do that. Trajectory milling options. This is for very complex where you want to follow that trajectory exactly. You also have to define what your Z action of your mill is, that it doesn't turn on a different location. And now you can put that normal to your surface, which makes it easier. There's also a functionality to a motion plane where you want to retract to. You see the track that my mill will follow and the yellow lines. I can just set a datum plane where he has to work back to, and that's my limit where you have to go back to every time. And of course, easily manual managing the views, what you want, the lines that you want, the envelope, so you can select what you want to see at every time. A little bit more accessible than it was in the past. For axis turning, turn milling functionality, the combination of both, and there's also some improvements. The new interface as well, so we have the new module structure, and some other things that are added to that as well. So some improvements in that area in there as well. And that was it from my side. I'm looking at Inne if there are some questions.
Yes, I have one question from, and it's about the model-based definition. Someone asked whether the nodes on CAD geometry, if they can send to your vendor, for example, or your supplier, even if they don't have Creo.
Yeah, it's there's a setting into maybe it's easier to show. If you have from any file and you make a step file, so you can save it as a PVZ, of course, then you have full functionality. If you don't have that, you can save any file into a step. And the step, you have the option here to add or do not add your annotations. And add rich content, and that's two things that are going together. This only works in the latest version, of course, of step. Right? Step is the best way to do that if you don't know what system they have.
Okay, great, sounds good. There are some other questions, but they are more case specific, so we will come back to them personally after the webinar. And before ending the webinar, I want to launch one poll question. Normally you can see it right now on your screen. And we are just wondering, after this webinar and after all the information that we shared, if you are interested in upgrading to the newest Creo version and for what reason. And then the only thing I want to say is that we thank you very much for your attention, and we'll hope to see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.